more porous. And then you will get less brain activity, less dissociation, and more experience. And I submit to you that's what happens in psychedelic experience, under G-force-induced loss of consciousness, under anoxia or reduction of blood flow or oxygenation to the brain. That's what happens when people hyperventilate. There are even therapies that use hyperventilation for psychological integration, because hyperventilation increases the amount of oxygen in the blood too much, turns the blood alkaline, which is harmful to brain cells. So the brain capillaries, they shrink, and you get less blood flow to the brain, and that's why you can pass out if you hyperventilate. And people.
Disclaimer, I have no responsibility for the statements he makes about these aspects here, right? So please don't take my video here as any encouragement in any direction at all, right? Disclaimer, please.
People have learned, therapists have learned, that that has curative effects. Why? Well, because it's reducing dissociation in our individual minds. And that's what life...
So I want to point out, implicitly, he is saying that if you want to have a better view than no view through that windscreen, you better go and, strangle yourself or hyperventilate or something like that, right? He's implicitly saying that. This is my interpretation, of course, right? But, it doesn't, it's kind of close enough, right? Why doesn't, it's like all that basic everyday stuff doesn't matter. If people strangle themselves, so what? They will have an impressive, profound experience of that other world, right? There's a very old, I don't remember where it's from, but this guy penetrating the that sphere, right? Walking through that sphere into the starry night, or whatever it is, right? Sort of a metaphor for how to get to the other side, so to say, right? And I don't mean beyond death or anything like that, though that might also be a consequence of these ramblings he's going on here, right? But it's like he's so lighthearted about it, or what would the term be? So it's sort of uncomplicated. Yeah, when people do this, there's these interesting aspects that apparently arrive. So, but you're talking about, a matter of life or death, right? So death is not important anymore, right? It's like, this is just one consequence of your actions. Okay, but what is important to this guy, right? Well, he doesn't seem to have a strong sense of what kind of things he might trigger in people when he talks about various aspects here, or put forth what he thinks are arguments and so on, right? It's like if I talked about something that is potentially dangerous, but it's very interesting. When you walk along this line across these two towers, you will have some very profound experiences of being closer to God or whatever, right? But if you fall off the wire, you're fucking splashing out of the pavement, right? So it's like this. Yes, wire walkers are having profound, experiences. Things are coming together, and yeah. But if they fall off the wire, they're fucking dead, right? Unless they're no more than this above the ground, right? So it's just this appeal to the good stuff, and then pretend there's no potential risk in this. I don't like that approach. It doesn't seem he is concerned about what goes on in the actual, let's say, real world, everyday world, maybe I should say, right? I hesitate to use the term reality, because it'll get mixed up in his ideas of reality, right? But in the everyday world, that's not important. That's just going from A to B and buying groceries and going home and have sex with the wife and make a morning dump and, vacuum clean. That's just ordinary, boring, duties, right? No, let me sit down in my chair and have these interesting academic thoughts that, it's so much more important, right? Mind over matter, right?
It is.
And then my point is, then he's lost in his own speech without any concern how this might, be, received.
Life is what dissociation looks like, and death is the end of life, or the end of dissociation. It's a reintegration of our inner experience, our inner being, into this spatially unbound field of subjectivity that underlies all of existence.
So now he sort of explained his own experience and everybody else's experience, and all that is between these experiences, while his starting point is you're sitting behind a windscreen, right? And not only is he saying you're sitting behind a windscreen, or that's what he's saying, but he should be saying, I am having some experiences I interpret as a windscreen, right? In other words, I am creating a dichotomy about an inside and an outside, right? Just by pure imagination, just by pure interpretation. It doesn't follow from whatever experiences he's had that this experience doesn't tell him it's a dashboard. He himself, his meta-consciousness, or whatever he wants to call it, is interpreting it as a dashboard. And because he makes this interpretation, all of a sudden he can go out and talk about all sorts of weird dissociations and mind at large, and it's all subjectivity and, dissociating, half dissolved dissociations and interpersonal, and it's like, holy fuck, man, right? And as he says in this, starting in this part here, part 4, episode 4, he says, well, I don't remember exactly, maybe I'm paraphrasing, but the fact is that if, right? So he's using words to turn an if, right? If there is an outside, I actually want to make it a fact that there's an outside, right? Though a fact must be some reference to an experience, because he's keep referring to empiricism, right? How can you have empiricism without an experience, right? Whenever people do science or whatever they call it, they always bring their experiences along in order to get that empiricism, right? So there's a one-to-one connection between experiences or qualia and science, right? And science, it's not only when you do science, it's necessary for science, but it's necessary in all cases. You have to bring yourself along in order to have any idea what the hell is going on, right? So you can't say it's beyond your experience, it's because you have to experience it, right? So I've pounded this horse, it's long dead, right? But I guess I have to keep repeating it, right? So that's why I am keep focusing on that first step he's taking, because that first step is what basically allows him to go and do what the fuck he wants, right? Because he has disconnected himself from his experience, and more notably maybe, he has disconnected you from going and checking what the hell he's talking about, right? Because you're stuck with your experiences, right? So you have to, he's forcing you to go into some kind of imagination, right? And when it's talking about these scientists, claiming a dissociation, you are imagining in your mind what is going on there, because you can't help it. It's just what mind does. When you are told a story, the mind creates a mental picture of that story, and that's what he is taking advantage of. So he is manipulating you to make your own picture of that which he wants to make a picture of. And then if you're not scrutinizing what he's doing, you might be saying, well, I have imagined what he's talking about, so therefore I must be experiencing that which is beyond my experience. No, he's just manipulating you, right? And the worst part may even be that he's not even aware that that's what he's doing, and that's why he keeps doing it. Very well, because he's not aware of it. If he was aware of it and he understood that he's trying to cheat you, it would be more likely that he would look weird while he does it, or, something, but he's so convinced that he's right that it just sounds convincing, right?
Okay,
are you sure, Bernard? Are you
is this?
Are you sure, Bernardo? So he is sort of he's trying to catch questions that I'm doing here, right? As if I would like to ask him if I should trust what he says, right? That's ridiculous. Are you sure, Bernardo? Yes, I'm sure. Okay, then I believe you, right? This is for stupid people, right? This is for obviously this is made for people who have no ability to think for themselves, apparently, right? And hoping that they can sort of Shanghai them into their fold, right? By saying, hey, those people you tend to believe in, they're crazy. So you have to go to our community here, our congregation of even more crazy people, right?
Okay, how sure can I be of this?
Well, if you talk about being of how sure, you're not doing philosophy. Either it's good philosophy or it's bad philosophy, right? Either you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. It's not how sure are you. It's more like, well, I am confident that I'm doing something right here because I like it, so I'm sure. That's not philosophy, right? And that's why I keep pounding him for present your thinking between the conclusions. I don't care how convinced you are about the conclusion. I want to see how you get there, and I want to be the judge whether or not that's good reasoning, right?
I speak to you from a conceptual, analytic perspective. One can never be sure of anything.
Analytic perspective. Oh yeah, it's perspective. It's sort of going into these. Now I have to roll out my academic language to sort of, dupe you, right? It's like, it's sort of, what would that term be? Sort of patronizing, right? It's just, okay, now academic, and then little people, if you don't understand it, it's because you're stupid, right? Yes.
Except that there is experience. That's nature's sole given. Everything else.
Nature, if you have experience, how do you get to nature? If you have experience and you say it's nature's given, then you're creating something else you call nature. That is different from experience. Well, if you're starting with experience, then that nature must somehow have been derived from that experience. That nature must have been derived from the experience. So you can't say that nature is giving you the experience, because you can't get to something you call nature without referring to your experiences. And if you can do that, I would like to understand how you do it, right? So you're basically saying before the Cambrian explosion or whenever it happened, that somebody started to have some kind of experience. There was a nature telling that being to have that experience. What is going on here, man, right? How do you get to this? You were not there, right? And you're still not there. If there's something outside handing you shit, you wouldn't get to it. That's Descartes' old demon, right? There might be some evil demon placing shit in my mind that I have no control over, right? But you're just saying it's a benevolent demon that wants to help you rather than confuse you, right? I don't buy this shit.
Entails some form of theorizing. But I submit to you that the important question is not what we can know for sure. The important question is, what do we have reasons to take seriously as a hypothesis? Let me give you...
There's no we that has reasons to, right? You have reason to, or I have reason to, or that person over there has reason to. There's no we have reason to, right? You are appealing to a collective where you want to be the spokesperson, right? You're creating a congregation of people who have to sit and listen to you to explain to them, right? So you want to be the priest preaching to your congregation about how to understand their experiences, right? I don't buy that shit, right? Because this is the turning point where everything turns to shit. It turns to politics. It turns to authoritarianism. It turns to all the bad shit that you want, right? When you try and appeal to put your individualism on hold and just start to listen to the crowd. And I'm the spokesperson for that crowd. You know, you don't have to worry your little mind with this. Just let the big think for you and tell you what is going on, right? Yeah.
Give you an example. I do not know for sure that there is no flying spaghetti monster operating in a higher dimension and moving the planets around the sun using his invisible noodly appendages, because the empirical evidence is consistent with this hypothesis. The planets do go around the sun. And we postulate gravity or a curvature of space-time to account for that. But maybe it is the hyperdimensional flying spaghetti monster.
Why can't you... Why do you... It's sort of the game of terms, right? Now, to sort of a gimmick and a nudge to the all these what's it called? Supernatural supporters, the religious people and all sorts of people in that direction. On my YouTube channel, I call myself philosopher and Pastafarian, which is sort of the spaghetti monster is not arriving to explain something. It is arriving to compete with religion, but just using different terms for the same thing. That just sounds ridiculous, right? But it's about the understanding of the terms. It's basically the same as Christianity, right? And God and all this shit. You're just calling it something different that sounds ridiculous. And therefore, it points out that you believe in it because it doesn't sound ridiculous. And you have gotten used to think that way. You are actually not really dealing with what is going on in that story you are forcing yourself or have been forced to adhere to, right? So calling it spaghetti monster is as valid as calling something God or mind at large, for that matter, right? Or pure subjectivity. It doesn't matter. You can call it spaghetti monster. Why not? It just doesn't trigger the right imagination in you, right? It's not sufficiently abstract. It's more tangible. And that's why you sort of, oh, no, it can't be a spaghetti monster. You can't call it that, but you could call it mind at large, because that's so abstract that nobody can reject it, right? Because it's not referring to anything like spaghetti or anything like that, right? So that's why I like this kind of, it challenges those who are claiming insight and saying, well, I'm just believing in a spaghetti monster, right? There's no difference. There is no difference. It's a matter of words, right?
I cannot categorically refute that. But that's not the important question. The important question is, do we have good reasons to believe that the flying spaghetti monster exists in a higher dimension? None whatsoever.
What do you mean by a higher dimension? Now you're talking about dimensions. What is that? Wouldn't the world out there that he's talking about and seemingly have some kind of access to, right? Or claiming to have, based on his experiences, wouldn't that be a different dimension? It wouldn't be completely senseless to make that claim, but I couldn't support it anyway, right? So now he's using some language that makes it less likely that you should support the spaghetti monster, rather than when he chooses the terms pure subjectivity, it's sufficiently abstract so that you cannot refute it, right? But if it's the spaghetti monster, it's like, but spaghetti, that's what I eat in the evening, so it can't be that, right? But that's just the choice of words, man, right?
Fair. We just don't have good reasons to believe that. In the same
Now, he's also telling you what to believe here, right? When he says we, it's also you, right? And me. He's telling me what I have reason to believe, right? So he wants to control my mind, basically. That's what the Essentia Foundation is about. It's about mind control. He's not saying, we respect whatever you want to think. No. He wants to tell you how to think, right? I don't like that. Nobody should fucking tell me how to think, right? I would like to be on the sole power of control of how I think. That should be me, right? And I extend the same courtesy to you, right? I'm constantly encouraging people to think for themselves rather than just absorbing somebody else's thinking, right?
same spirit, I don't think we have good reasons to take materialism seriously. And I do think we have very good reasons to take idealism seriously.
All right? I think we don't have good reason, but I think that we have good reason that I'm right? Is it that we have no good reason for this, but we have good reason for that, and it's all based on what I think? Can it be said more fluffy than that? Right? How sure are you, Bernardo? I'm too stupid. You just have to tell me, are you sure? And if you're sure, I'm going to believe you, right? Because I'm simply so stupid because you have more than one PhD and you have come up with some very fancy philosophy. I'm simply too stupid. So if you just have to tell me, are you sure? Okay, so I'm going along with it. Yeah, of course, right?
It's not a matter of certainty. Look, we are monkeys running around a rock, going around the universe at a very high speed.
What are you talking about? Your own experiences now? Are you talking? What are these going around? And it's like you're talking about an outside. It feels more like you're talking about an outside than your own personal experience, right? If you're talking to me, you are pretending that I'm outside your experiences, and you are hoping that the sounds you make will be understood in a way that you want it to be understood. But that understanding must be outside your experience. Otherwise, you're just talking to yourself. You're talking to your own experience, right? Not believing that it's going to be received. But if it's out there, you can't say what it is. You can just say, when I have delivered this message, I have the sounds that are representation of whatever it is that I've created out there. So it's like he switches back into that paradox and uses that to claim all sorts about an outside that is just his experience, right? And he not being very strict and clear about this distinction is basically the whole structure of his thinking here is falling, right? The house of cards is just coming down. So yes, I could, I understand that this is not, a clear-cut philosophical dissertation, but then why are you doing it? If you are risking that people understand what you're saying, why are you doing this? Why are you not saying, no, I'm not doing these kind of shows because they're too simple. People might misunderstand. Go read my books. No, he does these kinds of presentations. And if he knows there's a risk that people might get the wrong understanding, then it must be because he is fine with that. Because what they end up misunderstanding is where they actually he actually needs them to go and think that he has some kind of access through that windscreen there, right?
We have had an intellect for about 30 to 50,000 years. Yesterday, the blink of an eye ago, in a planet that has existed for...
Okay, so we are all too stupid to understand what the fuck's going on, right? And he's sitting there, yes, he's putting himself in the same category as the other monkeys. But apparently he must be a special monkey then, who can sit there and talk to the other monkeys and say, yeah, you're stupid, but I'm a slightly less stupid than you. I can reach through the windscreen, the monkey windscreen, right?
Existed for 4.5 billion years. How can we be sure of anything at all? Again, we are monkeys.
Would you define what it means to be sure? Right? Would you define what it means to be sure? What is assuredness? What is that? Is it, I mean, if you're appealing to science, then you're building something from that science. And then you're saying, can I be sure? Well, why the hell are you asking that question? Because you're appealing to that which should be basically certainty, according to your understandings of science, right? When somebody has created some article, now it's certain, right? Because science, just the science. Then why are you discussing whether or not you're sure? If you're not sure, what's the problem then? Are you trying to build your philosophical castle on sinking sand or what, right? Because that's not encouraging in any way. At least you would say it's honest. But then thank you for your honesty. I'm not trusting your philosophy then, right? If you don't even believe yourself to be, I mean, I guess there's some contradiction in how should I approach this, right? It's like, it's also sophist in nature. No, nobody can be certain of anything or sure of anything, right? That includes you, listener out there, who is probably a stupid monkey who can't think straight anyway. So you just have to believe the little magic thinking I've been doing is slightly better than your monkey thinking. So you have to adhere to my thinking because it must be better than your monkey thinking, right? So it's not the lowest common denominator we can possibly get to, and he's just slightly better than completely stupid, right? So he must be on the right path, right? There's something like that I'm hearing, right? It's like, give me a fucking break. And that also sounds Christian, right? Because Christianity is basically saying you are worthless piece of shit who's born a sinner who has to go through, you have to, for 70 years, you have to take a bite of this big piece of shit until you can, if you're lucky, you can go and meet your maker when you die. Oh, man.
We can't be sure. The only game we can play is what is the best hypothesis we have and what hypothesis can...
You're not making hypotheses when you're doing philosophy, right? And hypothesis is science. You hypothesize that this is how things is predicted, right? And then you go and test it, whether or not that hypothesis can be turned into a theory, and a theory that can maybe be turned into a law or something like that, right? But it's scientific, and science is based on knowledge, right? You have to have an idea of knowledge. Knowledge is what you get each time you go and do empiricism. Then you have knowledge of that which is empirical. But that means you will have to have done epistemology, right? And in order to do epistemology, in my opinion, you have to have done metaphysics. Oh, by the way, I'm doing metaphysics here, right? So it's a circular argument. Again and again and again, it's bullshit philosophy, this.
Can be confidently disregarded, for we have no reasons to take them seriously. Well, amongst those, I would include the flying spaghetti monster and materialism, and amongst the hypotheses that make sense, that survive a logical analysis because they are internally consistent, that survive an empirical analysis because they can accommodate all the evidence and make sense of the evidence.
You didn't have evidence, right? That woman in Germany you're talking about has claimed something. Already at that point, it's no longer your evidence. It is her evidence and her report of her evidence. That's not the same as saying you have that evidence, right? She could be fucking lying, or she could be just destroyed in a way that makes sense for those who are listening to, who wants to connect the dots in a certain way and interpret what she says in a certain way. And then they have to observe it and look at a computer screen and see some color blemishes, and then they have to write it in an article and send it to somebody else who rewrites it and edits it and so on, and then you read it, and then you report it to me and say, now we know, as if that's empirical to me. It's just a story, man. If I can't experience what you claim can be experienced, then I don't care. And you're creating this, it's only people who have got shot bullets through their head and who have tried to strangle themselves who might have a little peek at the big mind, right? But you're born, disconnected, dissociated. It's only those who are trying to dissolve that dissociation who can peek into the big mind or something like that, right? No. If you do not have direct experience, you do not have knowledge. If you do not have direct qualitative experience of what is claimed to be knowledge, or you claim to be knowledge, right? You do not have knowledge. Done. End of story. It's the same situation as if I'm looking at an elephant, I'm pointing and say, that's an elephant. I don't have to do that. I don't have to point and say, if I don't want to communicate it, right? But mentally I do that, right? Let's say. If I turn around, I no longer experience elephant. At that point, I no longer know elephant, right? I may know some other elephant, but if there's just, if there's no elephant in my point of view at that point, then I don't know elephant. No matter how much I believe there's still an elephant behind me, I don't know it because I don't have empiricism about that which I claim to know. That means when I no longer experience whatever that is claimed to be, that is proposed, I don't know it because I have to say that proposition is false. Do you experience dissociation? No. Yeah, you're talking to a person claiming to, that doesn't mean that you're experiencing that dissociation. So for those scientists, that dissociation is false. I will stand by that any day. They're just relaying a claim that she makes, and then all these electrodes, they don't matter because that's just another qualia. It's a dissociation that is sort of interpreted through some colors on a computer screen. That's no longer the dissociation if that's what they're claiming. That is colors on a computer screen that is interpreted in a certain way. That's not knowledge of that direct, you don't have direct experience on something that has gone through a computer, right? It's bullshit. It's pure bullshit, that's right. And that's what he builds his whole foundation of. Now we have empirical evidence of dissociation.
Amongst those hypotheses are the variations of idealism. And of course, I particularly like analytic idealism. It's the hypothesis that I think is most plausible, most explanatorily powerful. Am I sure about it? No, I'm a monkey. I can't be sure about it. But
You're a monkey. You can't be sure. Then why the hell would I fucking listen to you, monkey man, right? Why would I listen to you if you can't be sure? If you can't be sure, but you're still presenting it to me, but saying, I can't be sure of this. Well, thank you for your honesty. But then why are you talking? Because if you can't be sure, I can't be sure of your... Can I be sure of your report about it not being sure? Can I be sure about that? I have to be sure about your report that it's not, that you're not sure. How does it work, right? I mean, you're going into loops and hoops of, one layer of, uncertainty and claims and basing facts on an if, and, also, don't give me any idea that this is parsimonious, right? I would have to be fucking crazy to support this.
I live as though analytic idealism is true. Because
now it's true. So now you can use truth in metaphysics, right? Please define, there might be diverting ideas about what you mean by truth. But I would say truth is a conclusion to a proposition, which is sort of, that's an elephant. That's true to you or it's false to you, right? Either you experience an elephant or you don't experience an elephant, right? If you experience elephant and it conforms with that proposition, then the proposition is true. If you don't experience that elephant, the proposition is false. So now you're saying you're equating a proposition with your metaphysical ramblings. You're saying your metaphysics is a proposition. It can't be, because proposition is about claimed knowledge, right? I propose that that's an elephant, right? I have knowledge of elephant. I propose that knowledge. And you can say true or false. That's not what you do with metaphysics. You just present your metaphysics. This is the structure I've come up with, right? It's not a proposition, right?
It's the best hypothesis I can come up with when I contemplate all the evidence and apply logic rigorously. People who think...
So the evidence is somebody else telling you what you should think, right? Because you don't have evidence of dissociation. You have evidence of somebody claiming that somebody else has a dissociation. That is a far cry from having an experience of dissociation. A report from somebody who has talked to somebody else claiming to have dissociation is not the same as experience dissociation. And no, at what point can you go away from your own experiences and let your experiences tell you about evidence? Isn't it you behind the screen, on the inside of the screen, interpreting your experiences as reports of experience that you should take seriously? So what was it, you implanting that ability in your metaconscious part of your mind, that you should go and listen to those qualia that should be understood as reports of dissociation? So you're letting your dashboard tell you that there's something beyond the dashboard. How do you get to that? Because all there is are colors and sounds and taste and so on that you can interpret. You need, otherwise it's just colors, a flurry of qualia. You have to do the interpretation, and that goes on the inside. So everything that is going on is always on your inside, right? So he's always on his inside, right? And even if we say that what I experience as Bernardo Kastrup from the outside is my inner version of his outside, right? So even if I say that's an outside, that's an inner version for me, right? He doesn't have that version that I have, but it's still an inner version. It's not an outer version to him, even though he interprets my language as something coming from the outside, but that interpretation is based on something inside him, right?
Think analytic idealism is implausible. Often they operate under hidden materialist assumptions. For instance, they will say...
Just like you did, right? A lot of hidden materialist assumption. Or at least they're not necessarily materialist, but you're violating that paradox you're pointing out that materialists are working from, or not identifying, I should say, maybe, right? By talking about this world that surrounds us, right? As if you're pointing to some experience, which is sort of a violation of the whole idea of being around you, right?
How can mind be primary if when I prick my arm with a needle, which is a material event, I feel the pain? If I drink a beer, which is a physical liquid full of alcohol, my consciousness changes, my experience changes. So these are instances, they say, of physical causes having a mental effect. So physicality must precede mentation. Mentation must be a sort of a byproduct or an epiphenomenon or a consequence of physical processes, they say. And this may sound very intuitive to anybody who is making hidden physicalist assumptions, because you see, under idealism, the needle that pricks your arm is not a physical event. It is a mental event that is represented on the dashboard as a needle pricking your arm. That glass of alcohol is what a certain transpersonal mental process out there looks like. And when you ingest that alcohol, you're bringing an outside mental process inside the boundaries of your altar. And mental processes have effects on one another. That's trivial. If you think bad thoughts, you have bad emotions. If you're worried, your thoughts will be influenced by your emotions. Thoughts and emotions influence one another all the time. For exactly the same reason, that glass of alcohol influences your experience. And that needle pricking your arm leads to an experience. But the needle is not essentially physical. The alcohol is not essential.
No, but it's all representations. The needle is a representation in your mind, and the arm and the pain is a representation. You're just, from these experiences, these qualia, you are creating a story, right? The needle going in the arm is the story you create from your experiences. And a lot of that story is potentially created by your mind without you being able to add or detract from the story. But you're adding a bits and pieces to that story because that's what the mind does, apparently. Creates the story about the qualia, right? But when you're saying, when I prick a needle in my arm, you are referring directly to your experiences. But if you say that's an outside, then what you're referring to there, the needle and the arm, is representation of what is actually going on out there, which you do not have access to, right? That story you have is making sense within your screen, and that's fine. But if you say there's an outside, there's something going on according to your dichotomy that you do not have access to, but the needle and the arm and the pain are a representation of, that is useful to you, the icon analogy, right?
Essentially physical, because nothing is essentially physical under analytic idealism. The needle and
physical is just a term. It's physical or mind at large or spaghetti monster. It doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't change what it is, right? And it doesn't change whether or not you have access to it. What word you put on the label there, right?
alcohol or the pill that you ingest, those two are representations on our dashboard of dials of mental processes out there. And
No. That's why it goes wrong. He can't say that. Mental processes out there, right? That's just a unfounded leap and saying, yeah, that's just mind out there, right? As the only claim he has to do that is, I'm not bringing some new stuff to the fray that I have to explain. If you accept that everything that is going on here, I call that mind, I'm just extending mind to be beyond your dashboard, right? So he allows himself to extend what is within to also be outside. And he doesn't bring any new stuff in, so he doesn't have to explain it. At least that's what he sort of attempts to do, right? But I'm saying you can't go beyond what you have to say about that outside. I can't get there, so it's unknowable, right? That doesn't mean you have created a dualism necessarily, right? You're just saying, I'm stopping there. I am saying that I have access only to mind, but I have only access to my mind. I have only access to my mind, but I'm working from the idea that there's an outside I do not have access to and can't say anything about. The only thing I'm going with axiomatically is that my interpretations of that inner experience is a representation of an outside. Then I haven't violated anything about that outside because I'm only talking about these representations and what I'm going to do about them, right? That's more parsimonious than his long-winded and philosophically invalid and logically invalid and linguistically invalid, cumbersome analytic idealism, right?
Mental processes do have cause effects.
And it's also that if he goes and tells you about that which is beyond his mind and also beyond your mind, then if you believe in that, then you are soaked, sort of. You're swimming around, metaphorically, in that soup he's talking about, right? So he's sort of putting it on you that is sort of around you. He's dissociated over there, but he's talking about that which you're swimming around in, right? It's like if you were in a swimming pool and you hear one other with a bathing helmet over there, right? Saying, oh, we are in mind at large. Rather than saying, I don't know what the fuck I'm swimming around in, right? Because that bathing suit hat over there is just a representation on my mind, right? But he wants to extract that and put it outside in that mind, in that thing you don't have access to, and then claim that he can talk to you about that which you are swimming around in. Right? It might be a stupid analogy, this, but it's sort of the same. It sort of creeps up on you then, right? What he's saying, oh, I'm in this thing that he's claiming. Oh my God, right? It's sort of, rather than saying, no, I have my own experiences. I can't tell you what it is out there. I can only work from my own representations, right? And because I say it's representations, I'm accepting there is an outside, while I'm not telling you anything about what might be out there, because I can't. I can only say, I have these experiences inside me that I'm treating as a representation. And if you are receiving this and understanding what I'm saying and can refer to it from your own philosophy, maybe we can agree on each other's representations, right? Maybe that's the avenue you should go.
On one another. Another criticism that I often hear is it has to do with the hypothesis of life being what alters look like, dissociative alters. And people will say, I can shake hands with somebody else. I can hit someone else over the head. But
he hit somebody over the head? What's the matter with him, man, right?
One altar cannot shake hands with another altar. One altar cannot hit another altar over the head. Well, is that actually true?
What?
Let's look at the research.
What?
To make a proper
Well,
comparison.
I'm just lost in this. What is an altar then? Well, what is he's sort of this idea, this picture he has of these dissociated minds out there that are pure abstractions in his head, and he's talking about, can they go and hit each other on the head or something like that? I mean, holy shit. No, because if you go down this route, right, you will perpetually be in a state of uncertainty. Because you are trying to get a grasp of something you cannot possibly get a grasp on. And you will spend the rest of your days trying to come to terms with this, while ignoring the important part, which is your everyday experience that you're dealing with on an everyday basis, right?
Person we have to look at the dream life of patients with DID, dissociative identity disorder.
Yeah, okay. We have to have some malfunctioning people and go and listen to their dreams in order to have a grasp on this metaphysics. Get it the fuck out of my face, man, right? No, you little peon. There's some special persons, oracles over here who have been eating and drinking and shooting their brains. Right? They have a dream that we have to listen to.
Because if analytic idealism is correct, then we are all inside a mind.
If it's correct, but so now you're not sure whether it's correct. But who's going to decide if it's correct then? Right? If it's correct, you are appealing to it not being correct. So what are you doing, man? I mean, don't you think it's correct yourself? Well, if it's not correct, if you're not sure that it's correct, where is it in your argumentation that it falls short? Point that out. Be honest, man. Tell us where the problem is. At least you're honest about it, but then point to the problems. Where is it? Because you made a series of statements that supposedly should end up convincing me. And now you're saying, well, if it's the case, what is going on here, man?
And there's nothing outside.
Who's going to be the judge? If you can't, then I can't, right? If you can't be sure, then I fucking for sure can't be sure, right? Because you're just relaying your philosophy. I'm not taking part of your philosophy. And if you, as the first person having access to your philosophy, and you're not sure, how the hell could I possibly be anything close to sure about it, right? And if we're all dissociated from your philosophy, then nobody can be sure. So where would assurance come from other than the big mind out there, which is your big mind daddy, apparently, right? You understand how crazy this is? I mean, oh, man.
That mind. So to compare it properly to a patient with DID, we have to compare it to what happens in the mind of the patient with DID.
Which you do not have access to. You have said it yourself. It's a part of the foundation of your philosophy. We can't go and experience their mind. Right? You can't, I can't, this person over there can. And if they can, how do they do that? Well, all I'm hearing is they're referring to their personal experiences. Then it's not an access to other people's minds, right?
So let's look at the dream life of patients with DID. Harvard.
How do I look at it? Do I open my eye and look at the... No, that's not what you mean, right? You're not directly looking at it. You're looking at some kind of report of it. Well, that's not looking at it then, right? That's looking at a report of it, right?
Did research on that. Deidre Barrett, many years ago. And it turns out that 1/4 of patients with DID report, maybe more, have those dreams, but 1/4 report dreams in which the different authors partake in the same dream. And they can see the other authors as different characters.
Who the hell knows what goes on in those minds, right? If this starts to sound like those who are subjecting themselves to some kind of woo-woo shit, right, are more likely to connect the dots in a way that lead them to a dissociation that creates a new story that is interesting and all. It might be woo, right? It's all about using words to convince other people of something you do not have access to. And science is doing the same fallacious kind of conclusion building, right? It's this trust the science mentality. When somebody uses the magic word science, you have to accept it as knowledge. something like that, right? That is basically violating any philosophical coherence, right? It's just violating basic philosophy, and in that breath of air, I might add that that's on philosophers. All these tens of thousands of academic philosophers that have been cracked out since the dawn of the last century, right? Haven't done anything that remotely close to getting to a consensus on what you mean by knowledge, right? And knowledge is a foundation for doing science, right? So it doesn't work. You can't trust whatever people call science because it's based on something that hasn't been defined by any philosopher yet. There's no consensus even, right? People discussing left and right what you mean by knowledge. And still, there are scientists in the same academic sphere going around claiming all sorts of insight based on knowledge that hasn't been defined yet. What's going on, man, right? No, there's some foundational stuff here that has to be grasped, that hasn't been philosophical metaphysics, that hasn't been done, that needs to be done, and it's in the end, it's about agreeing upon it, right? And of course, Bernardo Kastrup understands this because he would like you to agree upon his philosophy. But what I don't like about his presentation is he presented as if he's handing you a message, this is what you should believe, rather than saying, this is my philosophy, right? Because there's something about when people try to enforce their philosophy on you, you're like, yeah, hang on, stay away from me, mate, right? Unless it taps into your preconceived confirmation bias of where it should lead, and if that philosophy fits, then you're more likely to just take it because it fits your narrative, right? But sort of an open idea philosophy where, okay, I'm game for anything basically. I'm just going to scrutinize it as I'm doing here, right? Then I'm listening to basically anything. I want to be inspired, but I'm going to fucking scrutinize it, right? And if it's not presented in a decent manner, I would call good philosophy, I will not buy it, right? So it's a lot about the approach to presenting your philosophy that is inhibiting a good consensus mechanism on philosophical ideas. Okay.
Characters in the same dream. And lo and behold, yes, they can club one another over the head. Then there are dreamer reports containing exactly that kind of event. And after the dream, when the host personality wakes up and talks to a therapist, each alter reports the same dream to the therapist.
So apparently, Bernardo Kastrup is more interested in some people who have their brains damaged somehow or another, and their description of their dreams, than, for instance, me, who is trying to deconstruct his philosophy, try to find flaws in it, right? Potential flaws. He would rather, pull the government on me and try to, threaten me into silence. But he would go and listen to some weirdo report about a woman in Germany who fell down the stairs and had some weird dreams, right? It's just like, it's cherry picky, right? It's what can I find? Oh, there's this out of the 10 billion reports. There's one report from Germany about somebody having a dream. I'm going with that, right?
But the same dream experienced from the author's own unique perspective. And they report seeing the other authors and interacting with the other authors, talking to, shaking hands, and clubbing one another over the head. So the analogy with dissociation survives further than people tend to think at first. this may be the dream of the natural mind, and we are authors in the dream
Oh,
of the natural
this
mind.
may be, okay, maybe it could be, maybe. Do you want to go with me? Do you want to go on a journey with me? It may be the dream of the big mind that we're seeing. Yes. He's poking a hole from the outside in the windscreen so that you can peek in. So, if everything is mind, then mind can poke a hole in mind, right? A dissociation must also be mind if he's not a classical dualist. So, some mind can poke a hole in other mind so that some metaconsciousness can understand another part of mind that is beyond the dissociative mind that has been poked hole through using mind. Oh man, right? What a fucking crazy idiot, man, right? Let me go down and buy some tomatoes, right? I want to live in the everyday world. And I want to get a grasp on that. I don't care about these fucking cloud castles, man, right?
Hands talking and clubbing each other over the head.
Yeah. Clubbing each other over the head. Give me a fucking break. Okay, I have to stop this one if I'm able. Yes. I hope this is interesting for you, and I just passed the 1 hour mark. I usually is awake and listening, but I was carried off on my, philosophical discourse here, right? Universal consciousness, right? Oh, if I'm right, if you will go on the journey with me, you can go to part 5, right? Please share, like, and subscribe. Give me a comment. Let me know what you think. Are you a Kastrupian, or are you, a sane person, right? Let me know. Please share, like, subscribe, consider the board. And if you would like to donate and help me do this stuff, please, links below. And there's also a link on the board for donations. Otherwise, contact me if you want to make a donation. And beyond that, have a nice day. See you in the next one.